Water. Refreshing, clean, and flowing, an essential element of life. Second to the air we breathe, water is the basis for our survival. Water surrounds us, falling from the sky, rushing down streams, and pouring from faucets. And yet many of us have never stopped to ask where it comes from. Let's take a look at the origin of our local water supply and learn about the journey of water. Have you ever heard the term H2O? Let me break it down for you. Water is a basic molecule made up of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, hence the reason for the H2O name. When these 3 atoms come together, they form a strong bond that is difficult to break. The strength of this bond keeps a water molecule together for millions and even billions of years.
So Denver's water comes from snowmelt up in the mountains, from precipitation every winter. We take that water, and when it melts in the spring, we capture it in our mountain reservoirs and store it almost like piggy banks for water up there. And then we bring it down to Denver through rivers and through some pipes. Denver gets about half of its water from water sources on the Front Range, from the South Platte River, high up in the mountains, up near Fairplay in South Park. The other half of our water supply comes from the Colorado River Basin, from either over near Dillon Reservoir or from the Winter Park area. We have to use water tunnels dug through the mountains that takes water out of those reservoirs, and then we use gravity because those tunnels are tipped ever so slightly to allow for gravity to work. Like the Roberts Tunnel, that's 10 feet in diameter. Big, huge pipe. And so they're essential because they let us get water from the west side of the Continental Divide to the Front Range. So we have reservoir caretakers at all of our facilities in the mountains to measure how high the water is in those spots, and they monitor that all the time. And so we also keep an eye on the water levels as the snow melts, for example. We also keep an eye on the snowpack itself to find out how much water's in the snow, how deep it is. Do a lot of calculations to predict how much water we might get in the reservoir. We have a climatologist on staff that takes a look at whether not only that's happening right now, but what do we think is going to happen in, say, 6 months, something like that. And so if we know we had a really high, heavy snowpack in the mountains, and we know, if we let this naturally melt, we might overflow a particular reservoir. So we'll let water out of that reservoir slowly and make room for the water when it melts. And so then it'll fill it back up.
Currently, about 1 billion people around the world routinely drink unhealthy water. Poor water quality and sanitation contributes to some 5 million deaths a year. The Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment prescribes regulations limiting the amount of certain contaminants in water provided by public water systems such as Denver Water and the various water districts that serve Greenwood Village. Don't worry, before your water reaches your tap, it is carefully filtered and treated.
The process for water treatment is the water comes into the water treatment plant, we coagulate it, which means we combine the dirt, make it heavy, and we settle that dirt out, and then we remove that dirt. Then it goes through a filtration process, goes through the filter, goes through a disinfection process, and then we actually send it out to the system after that. So it varies seasonally how much water Denver Water treats. In the summer months, we can do as much as 350 million gallons, which to give you an example, that's about 200 Olympic-sized pools. And in the winter, it's more like 100 million gallons. Normally, we don't have a lot of debris in our water, but if there is debris, at the reservoirs themselves, there are screens at the intakes for our distribution system. So it screens out the big particles before it even comes into the plant. And then once it reaches the treatment plants, it's actually minute particles that we're dealing with. The way Denver Water knows our water is safe, we test it before it comes to the treatment plant, we test it throughout the whole process, we test it as it's leaving, and then in our distribution system it's constantly tested as well. So if there ever was an occurrence where it wasn't safe water, we can stop the process at any time. We can stop it in our water treatment plant and store it. We can stop it in the distribution system. We would know right away if it was bad water because of all the testing that we do. And if for some reason it was bad water, we can either drain it or Marston can actually recycle it to the front of the plant again. So after it leaves the treatment plant, it goes through our distribution system to storage reservoirs throughout the city. And you'll see them all around Denver. Some of them are underground, so it's hard to notice they're there. Denver Water stores approximately 370 million gallons a day of water.
You now have a good idea on how your water is treated to make sure it's safe for you to use. But what about water that goes down a shower, sink, or toilet?
So Denver Water doesn't actually treat wastewater in the metro area. There's another utility that does that, and depending on where you live, it could be a different wastewater utility. Really important part of the urban water cycle, there's the natural water cycle that we learn about with precipitation and condensation, and then there's an urban water cycle of the treatment system like we have and the delivery system for that, and then another set of pipes that are run by another organization that take that wastewater from our homes or from businesses, and then they treat that and put it back in the river. Denver's wastewater, for example, gets back into the South Platte, which is where most of that water came from.
Water is much too precious of a resource to use just once. Did you know it's even recycled, as Denver Water supplies more than 5 billion gallons of recycled water every year?
One cool part about Denver Water System is we can actually take some of that water that the wastewater facility is finished treating to put back into the South Platte River, and we can take some of that water and treat it again and use it for irrigation purposes or industrial purposes. So our current customers use it for things like cooling towers or irrigating grass or cleaning things up.
While 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, only a small amount is available for use. For this reason, it is important that we all work to save water, whenever and wherever possible, as every drop counts.
Denver Water serves 1.4 million people, and if you break that down, about 70% of that or so are residential, 23% would be business or industrial, 6% would maybe be irrigation only, and then 4% would be public or governmental agencies. So even when Denver is not in a drought, it's really important that customers and just our community in general conserves water and acts efficiently. So it depends a little bit on what you have control over, right? So even students your age who are young, you may not have control over lots of things, but you would have, for example, control over if you turn the water off when you brush your teeth, how long you took in the shower, those kinds of things, because you're always in control of that. Now, when you get older, you have more levels of control, and you can do things like making sure you're only running a dishwasher when it's completely full, or full loads of laundry, those kinds of things. But then, remember, 50% of our water use gets used outdoors. So that's our biggest area of efficiency. So turning the sprinkler system off if it's been raining, for example, or if it's windy, limiting the numbers of days you water during the week, those are really important things to do. Unfortunately, the reality that we have here in Colorado is we are only getting water from precipitation. So it's only supplied for us in Denver by snowpack, and it changes every year. We don't get the same amount of snow. So we have to be really mindful of how we use water all the time. So we need to make sure that that water's there if we do have a drought, because a drought could start tomorrow. We could have a really wet period just as well.